Thanks, Councillor Coban.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you everyone for joining us here today for the Skills Economy and Growth Scrutiny Commission. I'd like to think I'm getting used to chairing via virtually, but it gets more difficult every other sort of meeting. But no, I hope you all are keeping well. Obviously, it's a difficult time, but yeah, I hope you all are great. And thank you again to all of our guests for being with us here today. I'm going to do introductions in a moment, and we'll get through to the purpose of today's meeting. But before we do continue, there are a few things that I just have to remind all of you on the call today with me through this link, and also those who are watching us on YouTube or who will watch it later on. The first is that this meeting is being recorded now. If you're obviously speaking, please make sure that you're muted throughout the discussion, and where you are sort of indicated and asked by the chair to speak. So in this case, me, and then you can unmute yourself. The other thing is as well, please do keep your cameras on if you're speaking. You're free to keep your camera off whilst you're not speaking, but it's just good practice for us to be able to kind of see who is speaking on the screen. If you'd like to speak, you can use the raise your hand function. It's on the bottom right of your screen. You should see it. If you don't, feel free to chat just to me to indicate that you'd like to speak. The chat function is not there to be used as a conversational function, obviously, because it's not available to external viewers. And also the other reason why is as well, it may contain sort of personal and sensitive information. And obviously this is being recorded. So yeah, please try to avoid the chat function for general commentary unless it's a you need to ask and you're not able to do so. And the other thing is, just to let you know, is obviously if you're not on mute and there's volume coming from your screen, then I will mute you. Please don't take offense to this. You can unmute yourself after, but it's just so we can make sure that you know, we can kind of respect those who are speaking. Great. So I think I've got all of that bit of formality, the video formality out the way now. But I just wanted to quickly do a quick round of introductions and apologies for absence. There is no apologies for absence, and we've got all commission members are here today, and obviously all of those people who've invited have very gratefully have given us their times tonight, so we're very grateful for that. I just wanted to quickly go around and just do a quick round of introductions for the purpose of everyone in the meeting, but also for those who may be watching this video right now on YouTube or who may be watching it later on down the line. So if you could just say your name and who you are, just very short, that would be great. And what I will do is I'll call you by your first name to who I see, so you can introduce yourself to avoid loads of people jumping on at the same time. So my name is Mete Coban. I'm a councillor for Stoke Newington, and I'm also the chair of this commission. Steve?
Councillor Steve Race, Hoxton East and Shoreditch, member of the commission.
Gilbert?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gilbert Smith, Stoke Newington councillor and member of this commission. Also fair trade champion. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have said Councillor Race and Councillor Smyth, by the way, for more formality. So go Councillor Pallis.
Hi there, I'm Councillor Sam Pallis. I'm one of the Caithnove ward councillors and also a member of the commission. Thank you.
Councillor Billington.
Hello, I'm Councillor Billington. I'm the councillor for de Beauvoir ward.
And also vice chair of this commission.
Oh, sorry, and also vice chair of this commission.
Councillor Lufkin.
Hi, I'm Councillor Richard Lufkin. I'm one of the councillors for the Shackwell ward and a member of the commission. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Hi, my name's Carol Williams. I'm councillor and cabinet member for Employment, Skills and Human Resources.
Thank you for being with us today. Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Guy Nicholson, councillor and cabinet member for Planning, Culture and the Inclusive Economy.
Yeah. Ian.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ian Williams, Group Director of Finance and Corporate Resources at Hackney. I'm delighted to be here this evening.
Thank you. Tyler.
Good evening. I'm Tyler Linton. I'm one of the managers in Streetscene and a council officer. Thank you for having me tonight.
Great. And then we've got Luke.
Good evening, everybody. My name's McLoughlin. I'm the landlord of the Spread Eagle public house in Homerton, and I've been invited on as a guest.
Thank you. We've got a few other people. Andy?
Well, good evening. My name is Andrew Cunningham. I'm the head of Streetscene for Hackney.
Thank you. I believe we're also meant to be joined by Councillor Burke as well, but he'll be joining us as the meeting develops. And we've got Solomon.
Hi, good evening. I'm Solomon Rose. I'm a graduate trainee for Improving Outcomes for Young Black Men. And we have a couple of our accountability board members here this evening who will just be observing. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally on the screen, I can see Simon.
Sorry, Simon is one of our accountability.
Okay, sure. Okay, I just wanted to just make sure that everyone was introduced for the purpose of everyone else in the meeting. Right, so I'm going to kind of whiz through the business end because we've got a lot to go through for today's Scrutiny Commission. The second item is urgent items of business. I'm not aware of any urgent items. So a small number of us have also joined via the phone elsewhere. So just to sort of thank you again for joining us. Number 3 is declarations of any interest. Do we have any members who'd like to declare? Yep, Councillor Race.
Yeah, I'm a member of the London Cycling Campaign.
Yeah, Councillor Lufkin.
I'm also a member of the London Cycling Campaign. Thanks.
Councillor Billington, do you have any?
I also am a member of the London Cycling Campaign, and I've also just been appointed, and this is yet to be recorded in, for the council because it's just happened today, that I've become a member of the Independent Advisory Group from Marston Holdings, who have a relevant interest in traffic management.
Thank you very much, Councillor Billington. Any other interest from Pallis? No? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I don't believe those interests stop you from taking part of the conversation, but thank you for noting that for public records. Number 4 item is just an update on business statistics in relation to COVID. This is something that we're following on from the previous meeting where members wanted to have some key statistical updates just in relation to our local economy. So these are just some headlines that I'm just going to read out to you all. Feel free to ask any follow-up questions, or I'd like, in interest of time, to just keep moving on. The overall employment rate for London continues to be high at 76.5%. And the full impact of COVID-19 on unemployment isn't visible in these numbers just necessarily yet. In January this year, there were 12,395 people on universal credit in Hackney and 13,125 in February. In September, this had risen to 31,522 people. This figure for employment includes people on the furlough scheme, that's in relation to the previous one, whom are likely to become unemployed as the scheme ends. Across London, as per the 31st of August, 557,400 employments were furloughed, 13% of which were eligible jobs. In Hackney, this was 18,900 people, and that's 14%. 4,659 businesses received either small business grant fund or retail, leisure and hospitality grant fund, and this amounted to 68.15 million. The discretionary grant fund went to 649 businesses and amounted to 3.4 million. And that's the latest figures that we have in relation to business statistics in relation and our local employment in relation to Hackney. Is there any questions or any points that would like to be made by the commission members? No. Great. So the next section on our item, and just before we get to this specific item, just to kind of explain the purpose of this meeting today, is we'll be looking at 2 specific areas. The first is in relation to our local economy. I know we've had Councillor Nicholson, and very gratefully he's been joining us every time we've called him, and we're very grateful for his time. This obviously is an evolving matter. You know, when we had this meeting previously and when we had Councillor Nicholson, there's been a lot of developments in relation to COVID. I mean, we've had the restrictions imposed with the tier system, and then we've obviously had the second national lockdown. So it's important that we bring back Councillor Nicholson to this meeting to discuss the impact of that on our local economy and what steps that Hackney are taking to improve that. We're obviously joined by Luke as well, who earlier introduced himself from one of our local businesses. Again, he runs a local pub, and it's important for us to understand again that business perspective in relation to that. And of course, we have Ian Williams, our Group Director of Finance and Corporate Resources, to speak about the business rate relief as well. So we got that as the first item of the agenda. The second key item is the LTN, the low traffic neighbourhood scheme. Again, I won't go too much into detail about it just yet because we're going to come onto it, but we're going to be looking at, again, you know, as transport is one of the key remit areas of this commission, it's important for us as a commission at a very early stage to be able to speak to the cabinet member responsible, and obviously to the officers, just to kind of better understand the impact the LTN scheme is having so far, and also some of the rationale to why it's being rolled out and what some of the longer term plans are in helping build a much more safer, I guess, and more sustainable borough. And then we've also got a letter of reply from Councillor Williams and Councillor Momo around the sort of the definition of key workers, which we'll kind of look at very briefly and then discuss our work programme. So those are just two matters that may not necessarily be relating to everyone in the meeting, but yeah. Cool. So for our first item, which is around supporting local businesses and our economy, in our meeting in June, you'll remember it was discussed how businesses and by extension the local economy was faring amid the economic disruption caused by COVID. Since that time, cases of coronavirus obviously have increased. The nation is obviously in the second lockdown, and businesses are finding themselves in an even more sort of precarious sort of position. It's important for us as a commission to get a snapshot of what's happening now, what support should be provided to the local economy, and further what is required, and also what role the commission can play within that. So this evening, as I've said, we're joined by a number of guests who are going to be sort of providing us a quick snapshot. They have been given an allocated time slot and a guidance around what their speeches should be. I am going to be quite harsh with the timings this meeting and in this commission. So if I could firstly start by introducing Councillor Guy Nicholson, who's our Cabinet Member for Planning, Culture and Inclusive Economy. A lot of members of the Commission will be very familiar with Guy's work and the work that we've been doing together. But yeah, Councillor Nicholson, if you can give us your presentation within 10 minutes, that would be great. And I'll be keeping time off tab as well to come back to you as well. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mete. I mean, that's very kind to be invited to return to the Commission and to up on, as you described, where we see the kind of sort of the challenges for businesses locally are kind of sort of currently facing. Just as a quick recap, there are just over 22,000 businesses based in the borough, and by far the highest percentage of those businesses are actually micro businesses, a figure in the order of 20,000. And so we're dealing with a not insignificant economy with large numbers of residents and indeed others who may not live in the borough but have certainly set their businesses up in the borough, who are looking to those businesses to earn a living and in many cases provide employment opportunities as well as hopefully also kind of encouraging others to perhaps set up their business and start their business in the borough. I think cutting straight to the chase is probably worth just sort of fixing on some of the issues that have come forward over the last couple of months since we last convened. There are around about 6 of those, and if I may just quickly just run through those as part of this presentation, and then we can sort of take things forward as you see fit after that. Where it is that officers have been sort of engaged with the business community at a number of different levels, in different dialogues, different sectors, what is emerging is that debts are emerging as one particular issue. And by debts, what we're talking about here is actually as a direct result of the loan promotion that was brought forward by central government, bounce back loans and the such like. And there is some real concern beginning to emerge about economic recovery and how those debts can be managed. In other words, how can those payments be kind of generated to pay back on those loans? So that is sort of looking ahead a little bit. That is of concern to numbers of businesses around the borough. Also concern about the costs of reopening. And I think, as we've all probably seen, and I mean, Luke is in a perfect position to be able to perhaps sort of reflect on some of this and sort of inform us about the true implications of this. But there is a great sense about the costs of reopening and then of closing, and the loss of capital that has sort of happened as a result of opening and then closing again. And there is concern about the cost of reopening and rebuilding that business back up again. And that takes us on to the third issue, the rebuilding bit. In other words, a business is now sort of looking to perhaps land again, but to be able to kind of generate enough productivity, it now needs to re-engage, re-employ, and rebuild. And therein is the third issue. The fourth issue is to do actually with channel shift. Many of us as consumers have sort of channel shifted from perhaps visiting the high street to going online, and we are increasingly becoming a borough of sort of e-commerce rather than the physical side of things, and that for some is of concern. And that our response to that has been, as a council, so far has been not to fight that, but to see how we might be able to promote an online platform for local high street businesses, so that local high street businesses, for example, town centre businesses in Hackney, can operate on through both channels. Now that may suit some businesses, but not others. And again, it's a very varied all of these things. There is another issue around business rates and the future of business rates. Now, clearly at the moment, there is a degree of subsidy in the system brought about by government and its investment, which protects some and cushions the impact of a pandemic and lockdowns in terms of business rate expenditure, but it doesn't protect others. So it by no means protects all. But there is another longer term issue about business rates that is emerging, is that as part of the reopening and the rebuilding of our economy, what I would just put on the table, Chair, is the issue of the scale of business rates that are charged in our borough and charged on our businesses, and many are falling through the net. And finally, the last issue that I just put on the table, Chair, and I know that you and indeed other colleagues are very familiar around this one, Brexit and the leaving of the European Union. It does seem as if the government have every intention of leaving the European Union at the end of December, leaving that kind of sort of single trading bloc. There is absolutely no indication, as things currently stand, that decision will either be postponed or reversed. And we are going into this scenario in a very, very difficult and challenging economic time. And I think people are now more than aware of the statistics. Our economy, as we had kind of predicted, is running at about 10 to 11% below the level that it was last year at this time. And it is clearly going to be a lengthy reopening and rebuilding phase in front of us. I think, if I may perhaps, Chair, just finish there, and then just sort of throw it open for further conversation, where perhaps we can pick up on various responses that I haven't mentioned, just in identifying some of those issues that are coming to the fore as we speak.
Sure, thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson. What I'm going to do is if it's okay with you, is I'm going to quickly just go on to our next two speakers, and then we can then have a much more sort of longer time for questions. Just double checking, Tim, is that as we planned, right?
Yeah, that would be for the best. Just to let you know, Luke from the Spread Eagle pub in Homerton is having some connection issues. If Luke isn't available to talk at the moment, could we move on to Ian first, and then circle back round to Luke, please.
Yeah. In that case, can I come to Ian, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair, and good evening, everybody. If it's okay, I've done a very brief presentation that will sort of bring some of this a bit to life for people.
Sure.
What I've tried to address in the presentation was firstly, obviously, an update on what support the council has given in totality, but I just wanted to remind ourselves of what we said we would do back in March, April time at the start of the pandemic, and also update you on actually the level of support that we've given already, which far exceeds what Councillor Nicholson and the Mayor outlined as our support package back in March, April time, which might just be helpful context for this as well, if that's okay. So I'll just bring some slides up on screen.
Great. Yeah.
Just bear with me a moment. This is always the moment you hope it will work, isn't it? Eh? Right. So I'm hoping you can now see some slides on your screens. Could you just indicate that's the case? Because I can't see you guys now. So
yeah,
we can see it.
So what I'll do is I'll run through this, and then if we take questions at the end, is that okay? Or obviously, if there's questions I'm going through it, please do shout out, Chair. It's just I won't be able to see you. If that's okay, great. So what I'm going to run through very quickly this evening is a quick reminder of what we said the council's business support package would look like back in March 2020. I'll then give a quick update on the scale of the business rate reliefs that we've given out to date. Just for a bit of more context of what Councillor Nicholson very quickly outlined, just some numbers behind the business grants and the sheer scale of what the council has actually paid out to a range of businesses. Briefly touch on our discretionary grant scheme, which was a fantastic effort by the area regen team with working closely with business rate colleagues to get those grants out over the summer in a very tight timescale. And then finally, I'll just give a very quick update on latest announcements in relation to second wave support. And I'm sure Councillor Nicholson will want to update the Commission on some announcements we're making to business about further support that we'll be looking to launch over the coming days. So hopefully that's okay with you all.
Yeah.
Just by way of reminder, and I had to remind myself before this evening, just firstly, I was amazed it was that long ago, March 27th of March it was, when we set out in totality what the support package to business would be. And I think it's just important just to remind ourselves the scale and extent of that support. So as you can see there on this slide, a real extensive package of support over and above things that related to business grants where we were discharging monies given to us by government, but we took steps to support voluntary and charity organisations in our buildings. Likewise, we took steps to support a significant number of our tenants, commercial tenants, in terms of the challenges that they expected to face and are still facing. And full credit to the commercial property team for the way they've gone about that and really personally engaged with each of our tenants extensively. We also put through the immediate application of business rate reliefs for eligible businesses, and I'll come on to talk about the actual scale of the value of that, but also the criticality of it if there's not an announcement very soon about what happens from the 1st of April 2021. Other things that I was very keen to make sure we could do, because it was in our gift, was also to make sure that where businesses rely upon the council receiving money from us, i.e. where they provide services to us, instead of the standard 14-day turnaround, we'd already looked to pay businesses quicker than the 30-day period. We looked to pay within 14 days as an example. And I'm sure members of the Commission will be familiar with a number of other measures the council brought in, particularly in relation to things like commercial waste payments and some of those fees and charges where previously traders would have been able to pay, but obviously being unable to trade, they weren't. So I just wanted to put that in there as a very starter for 10, really. And I was just reflecting on back when Councillor Nicholson and I were trying to quantify what that whole package would look like back in those days. It seemed very distant now in March, and we had a figure on the press release, Councillor Nicholson, if you recall, of about £100 million. So I would just ask you to hold that number in your heads for a moment, because I'll come on to explain to members shortly what the figure now is and continues to rise. So business grants that we've paid out, again, I'm sure members of this Commission, most of you are familiar with what it is we've paid out, but so far in the scheme which we were administering in the period through from, basically once lockdown commenced, working closely with colleagues in the valuation office, but also across the area regen team, we paid out a total of nearly £72 million in business grants to 5,306 businesses in Hackney. And these could be broken down into sort of 3 key categories. A core sort of small business grant of just over 30 million. Not surprisingly, a big chunk of the grants we paid out related to retail, hospitality and leisure, just under 38 million. And then the discretionary grant scheme that I mentioned earlier. So real extensive piece of work, and actually for a team which normally collects money, paying out money was quite not necessarily always in their DNA to start with, but what a great job they've done of it. Turning to the discretionary grants that were awarded, say there's 3.4 million, and that gives you just a quick summary headlines of the sorts of businesses that benefited from this. I think we were one of the few councils who actually were able to actually discharge all of the discretionary funds that we were given at very short notice over the summer to support businesses. And I think it's a real credit to the team working closely with Councillor Nicholson in how that happened. Obviously, still more work to do now that future schemes have been announced. But I think what we've shown is that the council is able to support business at this critical time. Now, I know particularly what you wanted me to talk about, Councillor Coban, this evening was business rate reliefs credited to business rate accounts. And what I've set out on this slide here is just the scale of the amount of business rate reliefs that we've credited over the course of this financial year. And when I was looking at the numbers in the first set I received, I actually sent them back because I thought, grief, I was surprised it was even that high. But just to put it into context, the council's total business rate bill for the current financial year is of the order of about 165 million pounds in terms of the debit that we collect. And bearing in mind business rates, people often talk, don't they, that they think it's only businesses that pay business rates. I'm sure there's many members of this commission who are aware that actually it's not just businesses who pay the total business rates bills. Actually, the council pays itself a significant amount of business rates. Maintained schools also pay a significant chunk of business rates, as do NHS buildings, so hospitals particularly is what we'd be thinking of there, but also GP surgeries. So it is also important to reflect that a lot of the business rates that we collect, receive, or organisations who one would immediately feel are businesses, but equally it puts into greater context the scale of that 87 million pounds of support that's been granted.
Ian, just quickly, just to remind you, got 5 minutes.
Yes, so I've only got 1 minute to go. So, finally, just wanted to highlight what that totality of support so far comes to in terms of just business grants and reliefs, and just shy so far of 160 million pounds. And that's before we start to apply the new grants that we've recently been notified of in relation to Wave 2, of which the core grants there total nearly 11. So I'm sure if you were to also total up the types of support given by the council in relation to deferrals or support with commercial rents, etc., you could see how that figure would be significantly more than the 100 million pounds that we estimated at the start. I'll pause there, Councillor Coban, because I'm mindful I've covered quite a lot of ground, but hopefully that's helpful context.
Just quickly, actually, if you can go through the bit about the next additional support.
Yes.
I think that would be important. You've got 4 minutes, so.
Oh right, okay, sorry. I've already hit 5. That's right. Yes, so we're currently in the process of working through the detailed guidance that's been issued by government, and only issued really in detail in the last week or so. Councillor Nicholson and I will be working very closely on that with colleagues in Area Regen and business rates, and we'll be planning to launch, if it's not launched already, details on our website of the various schemes. And the various schemes are quite complex in terms of their makeup, and they comprise a range of schemes, either for businesses that are open but heavily restricted in how they can trade, and then also, as you'd expect, real support packages for those businesses that are actually just closed and can't trade, similar to what happened before. I think looking at the detailed guidance that's come out, though, obviously we would really welcome and want greater local discretion. It does feel to me, from discussing it with colleagues in other London boroughs, but also discussing it internally as well, that some of the flexibilities that normally we would like aren't necessarily going to be there because of the way the scheme's been developed nationally and rushed through. But obviously we're looking to try and bring in those flexibilities. What I would expect to be able to do very soon for the Commission is to set out for you exactly how these schemes are going to operate in Hackney. And I'm sure Councillor Nicholson and I would be more than happy to hold a briefing session with colleagues, not just on this Commission, but across the council as well when that's ready. But as you probably appreciate, we are moving at great pace, and what we want to make sure is we've got schemes and approaches that really work and target the need in Hackney appropriately as much as we're able to, given the national constraints placed upon us. I'll pause there for breath maybe, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ian. I mean, that's very, very, very useful, and actually it kind of answers a lot of the questions that I would have had personally. But we'll come back to you for questions. So what I would ask commission members is if you can kind of hold those, your thoughts, and if you can note down some of the questions that you want to, because we're going to come back to Ian in a moment. Ian, just one other quick question for you, actually. Sure. Just very quickly, just to note, is it possible for us to have an access to off that slide?
Oh, certainly, yes, no problem at all. I thought it'd be useful for me to have it as more of an aid memoir to talk, but happy to share it with you also.
That would be very useful. I mean, if you can send it, if you want to send it to, just send it to me or to Tim by email, and it will circulate to the other commission members, and then I think I would just find it very useful. I mean, I would certainly love to look at it a bit more. Quick, thank you very much, Ian, and we'll come back to you for questions as well. I believe we're also joined by Luke now. Luke, can you hear us? I know you had connection issues a bit earlier.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Councillor Coban. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. So
Great.
Luke is one of the founders of Spread Eagle, which is one of our local businesses, pubs, I believe, near Homerton, if I'm not mistaken, or in Homerton. And he's going to be taking us through a quick presentation about the types of experiences that he's gone through as one of those businesses. Luke, we are quite short for time, and I want to give enough time for all of the commission members and for us to have a conversation. So I appreciate you presented it, but if you can kind of keep it to between 8 minutes to 10 minutes, that would be great.
No worries, I'll race through it. Thank you very much for having me, everybody, and it's a pleasure to present to the Commission. Just to give you some background, I'm the co-owner of the Spread Eagle Public House in Homerton. We were established in 2017. We employ approximately 20 staff. We have a turnover in excess of £1 million pre-COVID, and 35% of our revenue comes from food, 65% from drink. And we have a midnight license through the week with a 2 AM license Friday and Saturday. So I just wanted to lay out some of our main struggles and what we'd experienced initially because of the main issue I think that a lot of businesses are experiencing, particularly in the hospitality sector, is cash flow, and having money to pay suppliers, to lay out the furlough for our staff, and to pay our landlords has been a major issue. So, you know, any sort of funding that we can take is very much appreciated. There's a lot of businesses that without proper cash flow are going to really struggle over the next few months specifically. Another struggle from our point of view has been adapting to the changing regulations, reconfiguring our workflow, the layout of our premises, doing risk assessments, etc. This has not only been time consuming, but also, again, costs money, and it's another level of complexity that we've had to deal with. Additional to that has been the increasing costs in terms of employing more staff for cleaning, from our perspective, for table service as well, because obviously people aren't allowed to drink at the bar any longer. This has actually turned what could be potentially be money breaking business into something that's actually losing money for a number of businesses. Also, having to supply PPE and sanitizing stations and stuff like that has been at our own expense, and it's been quite costly initially at first, especially. And also supplying stock. There's been an issue with getting ingredients for the kitchen and certain lines of alcohol. I'm sure this is going to be just as bad when we get to reopen next week. And with respect to Brexit as well, there's going to be certain items that aren't going to be available or are going to be more expensive, all adding to the costs of running the business. The second biggest outgoing that we have is our rental of our property, and we pay about £54,000 a year, for which we are outstanding 9 months worth of rent. So we're currently negotiating with the landlord as to what we're going to be able to afford to pay him. And those negotiations are ongoing. In terms of the support we've received so far, we've had the national rates-based grant that was very well received initially. But again, that along with the money that we had saved in the bank, that was spent within a matter of months. We've got a VAT holiday from a VAT payment of January to March, which has been deferred till next year, but that's £6,000 that we're going to have to pay early next year. We've had the VAT reduction on food down to 5%. This hasn't applied to alcohol. We've also had our business rates that have been waived, which has been very well received, and thank you all very much for that. That's something that we would need, I think, to have a look at extending into the future, because the effect of COVID is going to be around for many, many years for the hospitality industry specifically. The eviction moratorium has meant that many businesses that perhaps would have been evicted by now have been able to stay within their premises. That obviously comes to an end at the end of December. So I'm very hopeful that we will be able to negotiate a deal with the landlord to be able to pay some of the rents that we owe. But the clock is ticking, unfortunately. And it was nice to hear before that you were talking about the support grants. Looking on the Hackney website today, the grants that we're eligible, £2,000 for closing in November. Hopefully we'll receive at some stage. And just to put that into perspective, £2,000, we actually lose that in supplies of food and alcohol that we have to dispose of when we close down. So although the money is very well received, in terms of closing a business down and reopening it, £2,000 is probably about half the total cost of that when you factor in the staffing costs for the tidy down and the deep clean, and then moving all the stock to secure locations, etc. So it costs us about £4,000 to shut down and then reopen. So that's just to give you some perspective. In terms of the support, we've also got a £50,000 bank loan that we took out that we're part of the way through. In terms of support needed, when Tim asked me to present, I took this away and I spoke to a number of other landlords, and we kind of brainstormed as to what you guys could do to assist us. The big thing is cash flow. It really is. So any grants or any cash that we can have to shore up any payments that are essential would be very much appreciated. Commercial rent payments, that's our second biggest outgoing, as I said, after wages. That would be a benefit if we could look at some sort of assistance on that front. We've obviously, had to employ extra staff for cleaning, etc. So subsidising any staff salaries would be equally well received. And a lot of businesses have taken out their loans, and we have taken out a maximum bounce back loan. If we need to get any more funds from the bank, it's going to be quite difficult, I think. So if worse comes to worse, some council back loans might be something that we could look at. As I mentioned previously, continued long-term rates relief. Apparently we were going to be back to normal as of March next year, but certainly in terms of the financial situation, it's going to take us many, many years to get over this. And in terms of funding, it would be very useful to have some guidance from the council as to where we can access funds. It's very good to hear, as I said, that the regional support grant is being processed. But if there is any other funding that's accessible, it would be good to have some guidance as to where that can be applied for. The council perhaps could look at supporting local businesses by promoting them via adverts, encouraging people to shop locally, or for residents to spend their money locally if there's some sort of incentive scheme. And finally, in terms of licensing, a relaxation of regulations, so maybe looking at permitted drinking zones outside pubs. So in the springtime, because we've lost the number of patrons that we can have inside a venue, perhaps we can have a look at patrons out on the streets in the surrounding areas. And also, one thing that could be looked at should be the licensing application. A number of venues had to apply for a takeaway license or an off license when we first closed to enable them to serve alcohol for takeaway, and that takes about 6 weeks. We've also put in an application for an extended opening hours to allow us to open earlier in the day so we can serve a brunch. So stuff like that, if there's some flexibility from the council on that front, that would be very much appreciated. Now, I'm conscious that I've raced through that. I would like to open the floor to any questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it to you guys.
Yeah, Luke, that was very, very helpful for us, Commission. I love the fact that you actually came with like some suggestions on what the council can do, and I'm sure obviously Councillor Nicholson and other officers, and obviously us as a commission as well, like people will be taking those away to sort of listen to and think about what can be done, and that's part of the purpose of this course. So again, like hats off to you for everything that you've been doing during the pandemic. We know it's not been easy, and obviously we're glad that you're still around, and we want you to still continue. So hopefully, we've got all the right minds in this room to try to help support businesses like you and others as well in Hackney. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the floor to commission members. I want to try to make the conversation as focused as possible in terms of not going off track and talking about 10 different things at once. So what I'm going to suggest is that we start with Ian Williams and his presentation. So if there were any specific questions in relation to the statistics that Ian raised, please raise them now. You don't have to ask a question as well. So if I'm raising a theme and there's no question, absolutely fine. But if there are any questions in relation to the statistics, please do indicate that you want to speak to me now. So you can click the raise your hand option, or you could just put your hand up on the screen. So I saw Councillor Race and Councillor Smyth. So I'm going to go with Councillor Race first, and then Councillor Smyth. So Councillor Race, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. In that case, so just questions for Ian Williams then in that case. So thank you for all the figures that are really kind of interesting, and really interesting how they being so Hackney specific. Am I right in thinking sort of most of that funding came from national government rather than from Hackney, and our role was to effectively sort of distribute it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think my question therefore is sort of what did Hackney Council do that was sort of better or different? And second question would be where we might have questions is around the frameworks of how we spend that, how we distribute that kind of funding in the future. And so could you give a bit more of a kind of insight into what worked and what didn't, and what we would want to see change in the future?
Yeah. Ian, Race. Sorry, I don't know if that feedback's coming from me, but Ian, just quickly, if you could just keep your response very briefly, just to 2 minutes, if that's okay.
Yes, so I would agree with you in terms of the fact that yes, we were very quick on the move in terms of making sure those grants were paid out and applying the business rate reliefs. But that wasn't all that we did. So in terms of things that we did in addition to support we'd been given by government to effectively spend, what we did was sort of outlined at the start. First thing, working closely with Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Renison and the Mayor, we looked to put in place that rent-free period for our voluntary and charity organisations who rent our buildings. So picking up on one of the points Luke made about the challenges he faces in his business is that his landlord is still expecting rent to be paid. We put in place flexibilities. We also did the same for our 300 plus commercial tenants as well, and we're working very closely with all of them. As you can imagine, some have been affected more than others. There are some, like I say, a Sainsbury's, who've obviously had a very good lockdown in terms of the trade that they will have had. There are others that have struggled. We also made sure that we put in place payments to where we actually buy services off local businesses. We made sure that we paid them immediately in terms of invoices. Again, some other councils didn't do that. They would have kept at the standard 30 days terms, not just the 14 days we'd already had. And we were very keen to make sure that where it's local businesses, we were as quick as possible. Again, picking up on Luke's point around cash flow. In terms of lessons we've learned in terms of paying out the monies, and I think this is where I just want to be very clear, and I will go quickly, Councillor Coban, is one of the big challenges that we continue to face with business rates is that in many cases, the people who pay the business rates, often the name or the details we have for them wouldn't necessarily match the establishment that we recognise walking around on the street, for want of a better word. And also, despite many attempts over the years to get more businesses to pay by direct debit, still a number still want to pay, frankly, in cash. So that meant that the reversal of collecting money, which is paying money, did take longer in some instances, so I didn't have those back details. Mindful that's probably my 2 minutes up, so I'll maybe pause for some more questions, but hopefully Councillor Race that picks up the points you've raised.
Yeah. So, Chair, it's just, just very quickly, Steve, is that the council also suspended all commercial waste charges for businesses. It also went forward suspending all fees and storage charges and licensing fees and charges to market traders and street traders for the duration of the lockdown when they were unable to trade. It's quite an interesting portfolio, because I think what the council did, and Ian and the team led on this, about bringing in a range of kind of support packages that actually cut to the very heart of the council and the services that it was offering, or indeed has to provide for businesses based in the borough. Absolutely the right approach. I think, Ian, though, it's fair to say, and perhaps it may not be for conversation this evening, but there will be a day of reckoning with this, because this has cost the council a lot of money. And it's not that we begrudge that money. I don't think any of us this evening would begrudge that money going to the borough's businesses and everybody working in those businesses. But it will have an implication across services looking ahead. So we just got to grit our teeth and really kind of focus in and concentrate. But that's perhaps another conversation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson. Steve, Councillor Race, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I just a very, very quick point, Chair. I raised quite a few, sort of 4 or 5 cases on behalf of local businesses in Shoreditch who were struggling with the system, and I have to say that the team were very responsive and really helpful in terms of sorting that out. So thank you to the team for that too.
Yeah, I'd like to say that as well. I think we should definitely share our. Please do pass on our thanks as a commission to the team who are leading the grants and the discretionary grants. They're a very small team, from what I'm aware, and for them to sift through applications and those reports is quite remarkable. So, yeah. Are there any other, Councillor Billington? I'm going to come to you. Just one question I had quickly, and then what I'm going to do is just take quick rounds of questions. I'm going to take one last round for Ian, and then we're going to have to go to, because I know Councillor Nicholson, there's quite a lot of questions that's going to come to him. So just my quick question is on the support that's coming forward, Ian, what's the, I mean, is that going to be based on, did you say, just, it might be a clarification point for me, did you say that was going to be restricted, or did you say that the council will have flexibility in terms of how it sort of allocates the grants?
So what the government's issued in terms of the next wave of support is quite a prescriptive methodology for how we're to administer and to allocate these monies. And what we're looking to do is see where there may be some flexibilities within that prescription, whether we can really test them and push them to their maximum. But I think I wouldn't want people to think that the monies that have been allocated to us are carte blanche within our gift to necessarily allocate as to a scheme that we may have chosen to design if we had complete autonomy in that space. What we will be looking to do is actually allocating the money as quickly as we can, and that's the work we've already announced.
Yeah, the only reason why I asked that is obviously we've heard from Luke, and I've been speaking to a lot of businesses as well, and I think all businesses should be eligible for it. It's not to say that no businesses shouldn't get support, but of course, obviously some sectors have been massively impacted, and some sectors have actually done very well out of it. So for example, like if you're a supermarket who've not really necessarily been impacted by the same way, let's say a pub or a restaurant has been, then it's 2 different things. So I do think if there is a way for us to really make sure that we're supporting those who actually need it and can do with the extra bit of help, that would be very greatly appreciated. Councillor Billington, did you want to quickly come in?
Yes, I just wanted to get an estimate of what the difference is between how much money we've been allocated from the government to spend on this discretionary grant, and how much effectively that all of those things that Guy has outlined, Councillor Nicholson has outlined, how much does that actually add up to in terms of effectively economic support for our local businesses that the council has done off its own bat without any direction from government or provision of funding from government. That, I think, is an important number for us to know, so that we can see how our own contribution matches or is proportional to what government has done. I think there's probably further questions we'd like to know about why, if the more prescriptive the future funding is, the less likely it is for us to meet the specific needs of our micro businesses, for example, that Councillor Nicholson has referred to, and what we would like to do or make representations to government about how that money, the future funds, should be dispersed.
So absolutely, I would agree with all those points. And I'm sorry, one of the points I should have made when updating on business rates in particular is about some businesses doing better than others. Of the reliefs we awarded to businesses, about £3.5 million were actually to some of the large supermarkets, be it the Tesco, Sainsbury's, Aldi's, M&S's in Hackney, which, yeah, I'm sure a number of you have seen the article in Private Eye about the amount of reliefs awarded across the country to those institutions. Nearly £500 million, I think, was one of the headlines I saw. So that was just something I meant to put in as a but picking up your point, Councillor Billington, yes, we have done quite a piece of work to try and still are doing that piece to quantify, for instance, what's happened where we haven't been able to levy commercial waste charges. Now, obviously, we haven't had waste to collect in a lot of those instances either, so it's about making sure that cost is, we recognise where we haven't incurred costs, albeit we've lost income, and likewise, it's really all those supports we've put into, all those returns we're submitting on a monthly basis to government, set out in detail either the additional expenditure we've incurred by either supporting leisure centres in that context, or supporting services which would have ultimately relied upon that income stream. In terms of your proportionality point, the only thing I would say on that is, because the business rates relief number is so great, I think it would be better if we looked at it proportionate to the budget of the service that's basically bore the brunt of losing that income, because there's a danger that because of the numbers involved in business rates, that our support would look small relatively and would underplay its significance, is what I would say. But that is what we are doing.
Thank you, Ian. I'm going to open up questions now for either Luke or Councillor Nicholson. I think mainly I would want to kick off a question for Councillor Nicholson. Obviously, we've heard from Luke as well around what support that the types of support that they would need as a local business to sort of continue, I guess, both surviving and also rebuilding. Some of the points that you've obviously mentioned in your sort of presentation. What is the council, what some of those options? I mean, like, Luke's here. I mean, obviously, I'm not to put you on the spot, but what some of those options? I know we had a conversation offline about encouraging people to shop locally. I just wonder if you can very briefly, very sort of within 2 minutes, just respond to that, and then I'm going to open up for a quick round of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very briefly, yeah, I picked up, Luke, in your very helpful presentation and that really very helpful list of kind of suggestions that you put on. I think it was in your last slide. Pretty much it was last week, actually. The council went live with a kind of promotional vehicle to promote businesses in the borough. And it's actually focused on residents primarily to use our local businesses, yourselves included. It's called Love Hackney, Shop Local. And it has a set of objectives. And if I may suggest, Chair, rather than sort of share it all with Luke here online in the middle of the commission meeting, it's probably something to take away. Sure. And Luke, perhaps we can all connect up after this evening, tomorrow, and then make sure that you're connected to the initiative. Already, the virtual directory has sort of elicited about 1,000 registered users, and that's a great thing. Again, it's to help manage this sort of channel shift that's also taken place. But it is designed specifically to start local and to get more of us to spend locally, to use our local businesses, drawing down goods and services from local entrepreneurs, rather than sort of always defaulting to the larger national corporates. I think what would be really helpful, Chair, if that's okay, would be, Luke, if it's all right to have perhaps just a copy of the slide of that list of suggestions, and then perhaps we could take it away and just explore some of those options and what would be, really within the kind of remit of a council to perhaps connect with. And it would be a really helpful list. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of officers, when I sort of say it'd be a very, very helpful list indeed. So thank you for bringing it along this evening. But if it's all right with you, Luke, if you wouldn't mind forwarding that.
Of course, I'll forward that over to Tim after we finish this evening, and perhaps if I can get some details we can connect about Love Hackney Shop Local, that'd be brilliant.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson, for responding, and thank you, Luke, as well. Just quickly, I've got two commission members who want to jump in. We've got Councillor Rayson and Councillor Pallis. I'm going to start with Councillor Pallis this time. Councillor Pallis, if I come to you.
Yeah, hello. I've just had really bad internet connection, so I had to drop out of the meeting. Yeah, it's just picking up really about local high streets, and coming out of COVID, a concern might be that we see a lot of commercial units lost and replaced kind of with residential units, and I think this could potentially be exacerbated by the government's planning white paper. I was just wondering if we could hear from Guy about what we can do as a council to kind of mitigate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson, is it all right if I just take Councillor Race's question as well? Yeah. Councillor Race?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I've got two questions. Sorry, do you want to take them both at the same time? Yeah, nod. Yeah.
In that case, let's give, I think it'll be good if both of you have the questions answered separately to make sure.
Okay.
So, Councillor Nicholson, do you want to respond to Councillor Pallis, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Pallis. In terms of our kind of local high streets, our town centres, for example, we're in a fortunate position that currently our adopted local plan, LP 33, actually kind of supports the area plans in planning policy terms, which ensure that actually to change the use of spaces, business spaces, commercial spaces, whether they be retail or indeed any other business commercial use, then there have to be exceptional reasons given for that change. And indeed, in new development, it's a case of like for like in terms of replacement. So I think for the current kind of sort of period, what we're looking at here, Councillor Pallis, is quite a kind of strong regime in place around planning and the planning authority and planning determination. You are quite right to kind of identify the government's planning white paper reforms that are proposed to be implemented, because that immediately starts to erode the strength of those policies that we have in place currently. At the moment, our kind of administration's priorities, as I know we're all aware on the call, but it's probably worth just reiterating, are to ensure that our town centres and our high streets remain places of business and commerce, as well as where people can live. And so living and working balanced in a kind of sort of coherent way without eroding those workspaces, those business spaces, in whatever shape or form they may come along in, and losing them to either residential uses or indeed any other use, actually. So we maintain the vibrancy of our local economy. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Race, I'm just mindful of time. I am going to suggest that we push our commission-related sort of items slightly beyond 9 o'clock for commission members. Sorry, I know I'm going to be keeping you online, but I'm also quite conscious of the importance of this item. And obviously, we've got Ian and Councillor Nicholson, and then we've got the LTN meeting as well. So, Councillor Race, very quickly, and then if I've got any other questions, I'll come to them. Councillor Smyth, we'll take a round of questions at the end. Let me just go with Councillor Race first with 2 questions.
Great, thank you. This is probably a question for all 3 commission members, I suppose. Guests on this topic, I suppose. I noticed that sort of Westminster, in partnership with its bid, moved quite quickly to enable hospitality in particular, to continue to trade in as best way as it could at the very beginning of kind of COVID and at various points during the period, especially with regards to sort of street closures and enabling hospitality businesses to kind of get outside quite quickly. My sense was that Hackney was quite slow on this and didn't necessarily have a set policy on what it wanted to achieve. And I wondered whether we were looking at that in the future, as Luke sort of asked actually in his presentation, and B, were we slowed down by the fact we don't have any bids in Hackney? We've got a couple of business partnerships and things, but we don't actually have any bids, as far as I'm aware, any business improvement district. So if you could address that, that'd be great. The second question is probably a quick one. Given the changing nature of kind of retail in particular that Guy, you referenced in your presentation, is Hackney Council looking to sort of take a look again at its policies, especially around town centres and what our town centres might now look like in the future? Because they're probably not going to look the same as we thought they were going to, even sort of 2 years ago, never mind 5 years ago. And so, potentially they would be more geared towards leisure and hospitality and not towards retail. And do our policies have an impact on that? And do we need to look at them in the future? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Nicholson, just very briefly, please, if you may.
Of course, yeah. Thanks, Councillor Race. In response to the first question about business improvement districts bids in the borough, no, you are right. There is no formal bid based in Hackney in the borough. To date, we've always taken the line as an administration that actually let's get council services right, let's get them being delivered efficiently and delivered in a way that support business, whether it's to do with managing the public realm, whether it is to be managing public services that are there to enable business to happen, and that the idea that we would be charging additional levies or asking a business improvement district to charge businesses an additional levy over and above all of the other costs associated with businesses that wish to base themselves in the borough, rents, rates, and so on and so forth, then there was a very sharp focus on creating area-based kind of initiatives, the Hackney Business Network being a case in point here, and building the relationship with the council and between council and businesses before starting to talk about business improvement districts, where a third party comes in and brokers that relationship. So we've kept it very much within the borough. In terms of Westminster and that kind of impression that was given about opening up streets. I mean, Councillor Race, I think there's a very clear message that came from the Mayor on this quite early on late on in the first lockdown and early on in that kind of first reopening phase. His message was very, very strong, and it was very much focused on public health. So as a council, our focus was very much on public health, managing the public realm in a way in which we were attempting as a council, as an administration, to obviously restrict the movement of the virus. Having said that, there were a number of initiatives that were brought forward around the borough in different locations where streets were being closed down, they were being, to through traffic and so on and so forth on a one-by-one basis, and enabling business to kind of take place in the public realm. Now, the problems that came about were more to do with overcrowding, which I think Westminster as well. And with the overcrowding, of course, comes the risk of infection and the transmission of the virus. And we're public health space again. So it's been a real conundrum, Councillor Race. To be honest, I'm not sure if anyone's got the right answer. And it comes back to this mantra about, what is it, hands, face, and space, isn't it? I think is the current one. So important, and trying to create trading environments where that can occur. I think, as Luke pointed out, that costs. It takes effort, it takes time, it takes money, it takes people to manage these spaces. And I think that, to be honest, was just sort of what it was that the council was confronted with, and indeed still is. I mean, we just have to look at, you know, the way in which the council has been trying to manage Broadway Market, for example, in recent weekends. And this isn't a criticism pointed at anybody, business or indeed visitor or customer. It's just a reality about attractive places, and in Hackney we've got some very, very, very appealing places and destinations, and it takes a lot to manage them.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Chair, sorry, could I just slightly come back to Councillor Williams?
It has to be very brief.
It will be very brief.
Right.
I mean, I would say, Councillor Nicholson, I think there's something that we probably do need to look at in terms of when you look at, if you were to take Westminster and compare to Hackney. In Westminster, you had a system set up quite quickly where they knew that people were going to go there, and so they decided on how to control those people. And it was a highly controlled space where the streets were closed, the seats were set out, and it was very, very, very sort of managed. Whereas in Hackney, we didn't necessarily have that system, and what we did have was London Fields, Broadway Market, and various others. And so while we may not have wanted to encourage people to go outside after the first lockdown, what happened was that people did go outside because they wanted to. And so Westminster and the bid sort of had a plan for that. And I'm not totally clear that we had a plan for that. And further point on that is, if you look at Shoreditch, which is usually is a very thriving kind of heart of the economy for Hackney, with significant numbers of small businesses, mostly around leisure and hospitality. Significant numbers of those seem to be closed for good. Certainly are closed at the moment, and didn't do very well out of it. So I just, my sort of remarks would be around that, really, about whether we have lessons to learn for the future, given now what we know, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. I think those are very good points that have been very good points that have been raised, and I'd love to discuss them further, but I'm also very conscious of time. So what I'm going to suggest is, I think that's a conversation we need to continue. So Councillor Nicholson, if you're happy with it, is it all right if I take an action from this meeting to kind of continue this conversation about what we can do specifically in relation to Councillor Race's points? Yeah, okay, perfect. Ian, thank you so much for your presentation. If you can send us those slides, that will be very great. And thank you again for all the work that you're doing, and please do thank them on behalf of the Commission. We know it's a very big task, and we're very grateful for the work that you're doing to help support our businesses. Luke, I think, again, thank you again for your presentation. I want to catch up with you separately too. So what I'll do is if you can send your slides to Tim, and then what we can then do is make sure that we're both looping you in with the Councillor Nicholson and the team. And then also we can have a separate conversation as well to see if there's anything we can do as a Commission around kind of lobbying around the efforts that you've raised. And then Councillor Nicholson, thank you again as ever. You're always great, and you've always got time for us. And I'm sure that it'll be really good to catch up with you separately after this meeting to think about how we could take this conversation and continue it forward, and how we could support you in your role as well. So thank you all so much. I'm going to draw an end to this part of the meeting and this agenda, this item on the agenda, just because of time, and I'm quite conscious that Commission members don't want to be seeing my face until all the way late into the evening. But yeah, so next up on the agenda, we have the local. Wow, clearly I've been talking too much now. The low traffic neighbourhood scheme, the LTN scheme, which we've been talking about. Obviously, the coronavirus pandemic has had a huge impact on traffic levels in the borough, because people are concerned about being around sort of the buses or things to catch the virus. This obviously has meant that cars have been overly sort of used, and obviously the potential to vastly increase the number of sort of motor vehicles on our roads. I'm not going to give a whole spiel about the sort of the LTN and the rationale. That's why we've got Councillor John Burke with us today. We've also have, as well as Councillor Andy Cunningham as well, which is our head of our street scene as well. who's going to be joining us to talk about sustainable transport and management. Sorry. And then we've got Ali Richards, who's head of Streetscene. Sorry, I've got the two mixed up there. So thank you all for joining us. Again, what I'm going to ask is in this part of the commission meeting is just for you three, just briefly, is obviously you have enough time to give a presentation. I'm going to try to limit the time in terms of making sure that we're all strict to times to give enough time for the members to ask questions. Sorry. So if you would like to kick off, either one of you, maybe I can start with Councillor John Burke.
Everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
Thank you. I won't switch my camera on because it may crash the whole meeting. It seems to have a habit of doing that.
Yeah, Councillor Burke, just to remind you, you've got 10 minutes, so I'll be reminding you as the conversation goes on. Yep.
Sure, it's almost as if you've experienced me in meetings before, but I will attempt to provide the utmost economy of words and stay within my limit, but I'm sure you'll let me know if I don't. And the Vice Chair, I think, on previous occasions has done so anyway. So thank you, Commissioners, for inviting both me and officers to this evening's meeting to discuss this important issue. I think that you may be the first out of the blocks of the Commissions to explore this subject. And I think that it's such a significant change. It warrants explanation from the perspective of a variety of scrutiny commissions. So it's good to see Economy and Skills looking at this this evening. People will be aware, as many commissioners are also Labour Group members, of the underlying rationale behind the delivery of low traffic neighbourhoods, although it is important to note that low traffic neighbourhoods are by no means a new invention, and in fact have a long history in this borough, stretching back all the way to 1974, which I'm sure Councillor Billington would be able to talk to us about at length, because it is in her ward that the first low traffic neighbourhood in the borough is located, in the Beauvoir, and very successful it has been throughout that period. However, apart from Brownswood, where there is another small, unnoticed low traffic neighbourhood that I believe was delivered in the 1980s, we failed to deliver any additional low traffic neighbourhoods for the subsequent 30 years. And so I would argue, given the very significant increase in particular in the miles driven on London's roads over the last 10 years, now is the necessary time to move on that issue and to deliver more. And indeed, we have done. Over the past 6 months, we've delivered 3 new low traffic neighbourhoods in Hackney, one in Hoxton West, one in London Fields, and one in Hackney Downs. And we continue to monitor those on a daily basis. As I noted, since 2009, and whilst the evidence supporting the points that I'm about to make isn't conclusive, it's highly suggestive that since 2009, the number of miles driven on London's roads annually has increased by 3.6 billion. That's an 18.5% increase. Now, if you think that it took us almost 100 years to get to almost 20 billion miles on our roads, it then took us only another decade to add another 3.6 billion. And if that wasn't dramatic enough, I can tell commissioners that the increase in the miles driven annually on the residential roads of London over that period has increased by 3.9 billion, which at first sounds like bad mathematics, but it is in fact the result of residential roads having absorbed essentially the full net increase in driving on London's roads over the last 10 years, and having abstracted a further 300 million miles from an overloaded main road network. In fact, commissioners, since 2006, just a 14-year period, the number of miles abstracted by London's residential roads from the main road network is 800 million. That's right, the number of miles driven on the main roads of London have fallen by 800 million in 14 years. And the number of miles driven on the residential roads of London have increased by 3.9 billion miles. So it's a very significant increase, and that increase has been borne overwhelmingly by the residential roads of London. And the reason for this is multifaceted, but the main contributing factors from my perspective are a 10-year fuel duty freeze, which is significantly reduced the marginal cost of the operation of motor vehicles, new financing packages that make it easier and cheaper to own larger and more polluting vehicles, and the growth in the issuing, and in my view, the ill thought through issuing of an excessive number of private hire vehicle licenses in London by City Hall, and a significant increase in online shopping and the associated growth in miles driven by light commercial vehicles. And so as a result of that, we've had a significant increase in miles driven on our roads, but probably the most predominant factor in this change has been the advent of satellite navigation technology and the use of wayfinding apps, and they are strongly correlated for a very sharp increase in miles driven on London's residential roads from 2009, the point at which that kind of technology began to be adopted. So it's clear to me, Commissioners, that low traffic neighbourhoods are an important tool in ensuring that an overloaded main road network does not continue to be tolerated by policymakers either at the borough level or at City Hall, by virtue of the fact that our neighbourhoods have become pressure release valves for the main road network. In effect, what we are saying when we introduce low traffic neighbourhoods is that we will no longer allow Silicon Valley billionaires to monetize the value of our residential roads by sending through traffic along them, which they were not designed to accommodate. And as a result of that, a consequence of that is a significant change to the way in which drivers now get around the streets of our borough at the locations where we've delivered low traffic neighbourhoods. And in addition to the fact that low traffic neighbourhoods are not new, people will also be aware that Hackney, prior to delivery of the new LTNs, had over 120 modal filters which have been delivered in a piecemeal fashion over many years. And one of the criticisms that have been levelled at the rollout of modal filters in that way is that it was unstrategic, and that it failed to deliver the transformative changes that were required. And as a result, we have changed our approach to the delivery of modal filtering by developing well thought through, highly engineered low traffic neighbourhoods which seek to eliminate the problems of through traffic whilst minimising potential externalities that can arise from the creation of low traffic neighbourhoods. I think a final point I would make, Chair, if I may, and if I'm within time, is that low traffic neighbourhoods. Sorry, Chair?
You've got 3 minutes left, so you've got time.
Excellent. Is that low traffic neighbourhoods are a hugely important piece in the jigsaw of how we address the very serious problems, the congestion problems, the air pollution problems, and the road safety problems associated with the operation of vehicles in the city. But they are not the only solution. I have been very clear publicly that in order to address those problems, we will, in addition to low traffic neighbourhoods, require in the long run, and in my view and in the view of the London Assembly's Transport Committee and the Institute of Civil Engineers and Imperial College academics, need to deliver road user pricing for the main road network of London. I wish to be clear to Commissioners that I do not believe, and we know this because we know about the concept of induced demand, and we've known about it since the 1960s. I do not believe that in the long run, the residents of main roads will be benefited in any way by continuing to allow a free-for-all in our residential roads. In the end, they will all fill up to the disadvantage of blue badge holders, the businesses, and to the emergency service vehicles that need to be on our roads. The only way of addressing an overload main road network is by delivering policies to manage the overloaded main road network. And unfortunately, however, Chair, those powers are not wholly within our gift, and we are ready and waiting to work with City Hall on any measures it brings forward to that effect. But low traffic neighbourhoods are an important signal to City Hall that we will no longer allow our neighbourhoods to be collateral damage as a result of an overloaded main road network, and they now need to begin developing radical solutions to deal with the main roads of this city. And I think I would finally add that in addition to the low traffic neighbourhood measures that we're taking, I'm proud that Hackney is delivering, has delivered almost 40 now new school streets this year, but far and away the largest number of school streets in the country. Very important for discouraging school drop-offs by car, which make up 25% of the traffic at peak times in the morning in particular, and a key mechanism through which we reduce congestion at peak times. The largest amount of cycle storage in London, new segregated cycleways, and crucially, given it's the most important mode of transport in this borough, additional and new bus gates, extended hours of operation for bus lanes, and new infrastructure to support the bus users of Hackney. So I believe we have a comprehensive package of measures to deal with the issues that we face on our roads, of which low traffic neighbourhoods are and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much. And just on time, exactly on time. Very
First time for everything, Chair.
I mean, I'm actually quite surprised that both you and Councillor Nicholson have been like great with timing today. Certainly a pleasant surprise. But no, thank you so much for your presentation. If I can now come to Alid, would it become best to come to you first, or Andy, whichever way you prefer?
Well, I don't expect to add to any of that eloquent statement which Councillor Burke has done, and I think he's given a good summary of the emergency transport plan. It's a key document in terms of delivering our sustainable agenda, but I think crucially it also addresses the Secretary of the State for Transport's clear expectation that local authorities do roll out a number of initiatives across their borough in order to encourage active travel, such as walking and cycling, and discourage motor vehicles. That's all I can say in there, because I think Councillor Burke has already given an overview of it. Andy, do you want anything to add?
I'd just like to add that we provided a paper which is in the agenda under item 6D, where we've tried to set out the summary and outline of the emergency transport plan that was approved at Cabinet on the 29th of September. I won't go through that in detail because it's there for you to read. It has got, on table 1, it's got a detailed works programme with dates of the schemes that we are delivering. I think it's important to note that the emergency transport plan isn't setting new policy. The policy is already in existence with the Hackney Transport Strategy, the Local Implementation Plan, and the Local Plan 2033. And it doesn't seek to replace that, but it seeks to supplement it and to capture the most urgent measures. And as Councillor Burke has mentioned, it includes school streets, some works in town centres, cycle lanes, and the low traffic neighbourhoods. There is, we've implemented the schemes under the experimental traffic orders, which allow for the first 6 months being the consultation period, and we're within that period for the majority of the schemes. The schemes can be in for up to 18 months before the council make decisions on them. And as part of the consultation, we're trying to capture the responses either on the Commonplace platform, which we are directing most people to, and that's alive and there's a lot of information on it, or through direct contact to the council through the Streetscene consultations email address. The paper goes into quite a bit of detail of some of the schemes, and I'm not intending on going through that, but I was going to just touch on the monitoring that we are doing of the programs. We're monitoring quite a lot of information. We're looking at the background traffic figures that we have, and within the paper there's a graph which shows the levels of traffic from the Department of Transport's figures, which clearly show a large drop when the first lockdown happened, with traffic returning to about 75% of previous years' flows between July and September, and almost reaching 100% when the economy opened up. And that just shows the level of the regrowth in traffic with still a lot of places closed down. We've been looking at the continuous traffic count and locations that the TfL have across the borough. And again, we've shown an example in the paper of the traffic counts around Albion Road. And what we're doing, you can see that we are linking that to when events happen. So when the schools go back, when lockdown starts in the Albion Road, we can look at how the traffic compares currently with last year for when Wolford Road went up, and we can monitor the impacts of our schemes on those roads. We're also looking at bus journey times when TfL produce those figures, both on a borough level and also on a route by route basis. We will be looking at air quality, and we've got one of the largest number of air quality monitoring sites within London. We'll look at accidents, we'll look at the impact on emergency services, and we are working with Councillor Williams to look at some of the issues around equalities. I've got nothing further to add.
Thank you both so much for your contributions. That's great because it gives us a lot of time for questions now, and also it means that we might actually finish at 9 o'clock. So we've made up for some time. What I'm going to do is, again, like following the approach that we had in the sort of the local economy, I wanted to kind of frame the conversation, particularly, I don't want to limit the conversation, but I want to theme it around sort of the impact of LTN on the low traffic neighbourhood scheme on our local economy and for businesses. I know Councillor Burke mentioned that a bit. We want to look at sort of the equalities impact assessment area, and then also looking at sustainability and sort of the transport factor, the points at which sort of Andy Cunningham finished on. So I guess to kick us off with the impact of our local businesses, I think Councillor Lufkin, you wanted to, am I right in suggesting that you had the question in relation to the impact on our local businesses? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks very much, and thanks very much for that really interesting presentation. Yeah. I mean, we were just hearing from a local business, a pub. I don't know if Andrew and John were here for that, about the possibility of maybe opening up some outside space for them to trade from. It seems that the coronavirus is particularly, they're going to have limits on the capacity indoors, and I wondered to what extent low traffic neighbourhoods could be used for opening spaces for like places like coffee shops and pubs and restaurants and things like that to trade outdoors. It's building on a point that that Councillor Race was making earlier, but it seems to me that low traffic neighbourhoods enable us to reimagine what we use the street space for, and perhaps we could do that bearing in mind the situation that's going on at the moment.
If I could just come in very briefly on that, Chair. Okay.
Yeah, sure. And if you want to give a bit of a brief, so just going to give 2 minutes, Councillor Burke.
Okay, Andy can come in, I think, on the technical challenges associated with the creation of those spaces. I think from my perspective, I'm very supportive of the idea. I mean, I love the term reimagination of public realm, and I use it a lot. And I think that the times that we're in, I think, encourage us to think differently about how our cities can look and function. So as a matter of principle, I'm supportive of the idea of it, with the caveat, of course, that we do live in a densely populated borough, and that all measures must be taken to ensure that antisocial behaviour with such activities does not become endemic in any way. I think what I will say is that those kind of conditions exist in other cities in continental Europe, and I've never quite bought the idea that we can't replicate that in the UK. So I'm quite amenable to the idea of that, and I think it could be an important boost to businesses at this time. And I think Andy can take you through what the technical challenges might be associated with the creation of such spaces, such as traffic orders, etc.
I think there is a process within the council for looking at applications for people who wish to trade on the public highway, and part of that process, or the process, is run through the parking and markets team. And one of the considerations is how much highway space it would use and what they would have out on the street. One of the issues that we've had with both the design of the low traffic neighbourhoods and also in considering trading on the highway is emergency vehicle access. And what we've been asked in every single case is to try and ensure that there is access for emergency vehicles to get through, which is why a lot of our low traffic neighbourhood closures are actually open closures with a gap to drive through. When we've engaged with emergency services over the businesses actually trading on these streets, that same issue has it kept on cropping up as a key issue, and that seems to run contrary to what has gone on in Westminster. I can understand Councillor Race's comments about that issue, but a key consideration is ensuring that there is sufficient space available for emergency vehicles to get past quickly, and for the space not to be hindered by tables and chairs. So using up some of the space, say on the footway or on the areas where it's parked, is quite feasible to look at. But where you start talking about closing the whole roads to allow tables and chairs and street trading, that's not something that, in my experience, emergency services would counter. And they certainly come back quite negatively on that issue.
Thank you, Andy, and John as well, Councillor Burke. Just Councillor Lufkin, before I do come to you, just a quick note from Alid, who's put a note in the chat function. Of course, feel free to use the chat function, although just to say, Alid, as well, I think you came in a bit later, but we're trying to avoid the use of chat function just because not everyone will have sight of it. But I'll read out your message, which you've just said. Officers have worked very closely with businesses at Redchurch Street, for example, to facilitate outside table and chairs, which I think was to kind of illustrate sort of Andy's points. I wanted to kind of ask a follow-up questions on sort of the impact of on our sort of local businesses and impacts on our economy. Obviously, I mean, obviously, Councillor Burke outlined, the purpose of LTNs, obviously, to make our streets much more livable and a much more sort of sustainable sort of borough, and sort of to thrive, to make our streets much more thriving streets. Sorry, and I guess my question to you is has there been, what level of coordination, I guess, has there been, let's say, for example, with Councillor Nicholson, or with other sort of, or with businesses in the borough, particularly around sort of understanding their needs and how we can best support them? Or is that going to be part of the process sort of going forward? So it kind of slightly picks up on the last question, but it's just my understanding is have we been consulting with businesses? If not, then what are we going to do to sort of better consult with them around how we can make LTN to work for them, and make sure that they're doing right during this time?
Okay, so I think my first response to that would be, there is a persistent, and as we found by the number of kind of businesses that subsequently recant after low traffic neighbourhoods are introduced, but there is a kind of persistent series of kind of myths associated with low traffic neighbourhoods and their impact on small businesses. And it was not without a degree of humour, though I recognise the seriousness of the situation, that I commented recently that the very same groups of people, albeit a small group of people, who persistently told me that low traffic neighbourhoods killed small businesses, have spent the last 2 weekends haranguing me over a Broadway market that they regard as being absolutely over capacity, with people enjoying themselves and shopping in local shops and enjoying the market. Now, I recognise that during the pandemic, we wish to have people use those shops that are open in a responsible manner. But it can't be that low traffic neighbourhoods killing small businesses, and at the same time our local town centres are massively over capacity with the number of people who wish to visit them. And we know from the data that's been compiled on the economic benefits of walking and cycling by Transport for London, that people who walk and cycle to the local high streets tend to spend more on average in those high streets, spend more on average in those shops, and visit them more frequently. People who walk to the shops rather than drive, on average, visit their local high street 16 times a month. People who cycle visit 12 times a month, and people who drive visit 8 times a month. Low traffic neighbourhoods are by no means all about cycling, but I think it ought to be noted that cyclists produce 5 times the retail spend per square metre of cycle storage than the same area of parking. And over a month, people who walk to the high street spend 40% more on average than people who drive. So there's a very strong case, particularly for small businesses struggling at this time against the internet and larger out-of-town retailers, for the creation of human scale communities in which cycling and walking to the local shops becomes the norm. Businesses have a huge local businesses have a huge amount of benefit from the humanisation of our public realm, and from, frankly, constraints on extensive mobility via motor vehicles. It is often the case that small businesses equate cars in the locale with customers, but unfortunately on too many occasions those cars are driving right past the small businesses and going to the supermarket or the out-of-town shopping centre down the road, which has a lot more parking, an issue upon which small town centres cannot possibly hope to compete. If they are to retain their competitive edge, they need to accentuate the things that people like about those spaces, and not seek to replicate much larger scale retail environments that they can't possibly compete with. And I think low traffic neighbourhoods help assist in that respect. The extent to which we've engaged with the business community is the same as the extent to which we've engaged with the public more generally. We have an ongoing consultation via the Commonplace platform, and it may be the case that Councillor Nicholson has been engaging with businesses on these issues, but the only concerns that Councillor Nicholson has fed through to me from local businesses is not specifically about the operation of low traffic neighbourhoods and its impact on their business, but by using road closures to enhance the possibility for trade, particularly in the outdoor environment, as has been noted by Councillor Lufkin. On the whole, retailers and food retailers and licensed premises in particular seem to favour low traffic neighbourhoods and the pedestrianisation and the humanisation of our public realm. That is not to say, Chair, however, that it's necessarily welcomed by all businesses, and that's why we've sought, prior to the implementation of low traffic neighbourhoods, to work with businesses that have loading and access requirements to eliminate the issues that they foresee arising from the operation of an LTN. And Andy Cunningham will be able to tell you a lot more about that. But in Hoxton West in particular, we worked extensively with local businesses to eliminate those issues wherever possible. But Andy may wish to just detail the kind of work that officers undertook to address that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm gonna, and if you could do it very briefly, because I'm just quite conscious of time, and I want to make sure that we're getting through the different. Or if you want, you can just feel free to chat it through on the chat box after as well. But feel free to sort of briefly just go for it.
Well, I was just going to possibly give an example where when we made public the London Fields low traffic neighbourhood, we had issues around the businesses in Lee Street and in that area, and we were able to meet with the businesses, talk about the delivery concerns, and be able to change the design of the scheme to accommodate their needs. So we can be flexible. We are talking to businesses where they have got issues prior to implementation and then afterwards.
That's really good to hear, and I'm glad that that's something that's an approach that's been taken before and going forward. Councillor Burke, I've just seen your sort of message in the chat function.
I have a lot of affection for that phrase, Chair, but we hear it very often. We all use it.
It's yeah. I mean, you all can't see, but I mean, I've got Tim sort of typing away on the message, just saying, Councillor Coban, we've got 1 minute left. We've got to move to the next one.
There's no one that is as least observant of time as me, and there's no one that's more conscious of time.
No, thank you. Is it just for commission members? Is there any other specific questions in relation to businesses or our local economy? I think there's one thing that we can all take away, just speaking to the commission members right now, is I think there is a conversation as an outcome for this meeting that we can have, that we had earlier with Councillor Nicholson as well, specifically around sort of the use of our points that sort of Councillor Ray's was raising, and how that sort of supports, especially through the LTN scheme as well. Councillor Smyth, did you want to quickly come in?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. In relation to businesses, I mean, I'm thinking about some of the charges that we get about kind of the fact that LTNs increase pollution on the main roads, and a lot of our shops, certainly as a council in Stoke Newington, we have Stoke Newington High Street, which is a main road. You know, are we looking at looking into evaporation, the theory of evaporation? Do we think that in the long term that those main roads, and bearing in mind Councillor Burke says he wants to have measures in place, or the GLA to look at measures in place to stop traffic on main roads, are we looking at those pollution levels? Are we measuring those pollution levels? And can Councillor Burke maybe just talk to the theory of evaporation and how long he thinks it might take for that to happen? So obviously in places like the Netherlands and Denmark, the theory of evaporation is very well established. So I'd just like him to talk a little bit about the charge of the fact that LTNs increase pollution levels on main roads and how we might address it and look at it and make them safeguard in the short term against it.
Okay, if I may, I'll just quickly touch on traffic evaporation, which I know some of the people in this meeting, such as Councillor Billington, will already be very well acquainted with. But I think we can expect, and Andy will correct me if I'm wrong, that the literature suggests that levels of traffic evaporation of something in the region of around 15% can be expected associated with the introduction of new low traffic neighbourhoods. And what traffic evaporation essentially means is that by virtue of the physical changes, the structural changes that we undertake to the network, people eliminate unnecessary local car journeys in favour of journeys that can be walked, cycled, or conducted using public transport. And we actively discourage through traffic. And it's important to remember that something in the region of 45% of every car on the streets of this borough are passing through without stopping and adding absolutely zero social or economic value to the life of this borough. So by those drivers deciding to take alternative routes, and by local drivers deciding not to take the very short journeys that they undertake, and it's important to be clear that TfL's extensive data is clear. 50% of private car journeys in the capital are less than 3 kilometres, and 35% within that 50% are less than 2 kilometres. There are a very large number of private car journeys in particular being undertaken for an incredibly small number of for an incredible small distance. Now, some of those journeys are clearly being undertaken by people such as blue badge holders who need to do them, but I think it would be naive of us to assume that the overwhelming majority can't be eliminated. And indeed, the pressing challenges of our legally binding decarbonisation commitments as a country require us to eliminate those journeys wherever possible, and they present huge opportunities to do so, and LTNs help in that process. As regards the issue of displacement on main roads, I know I've made this point already this evening, but I want I'll be super quick. I want to be very clear that in the last 14 years, main roads have displaced 800 million miles worth of driving on London's roads onto residential roads, not the other way around. And what we may experience in the short and medium term is cars on the main road network that, instead of sticking to the main road network as they should have been as through traffic, have been taking people's back roads for a number of years. The consequence of that is that people may experience on the main roads on which they live the levels of traffic that they would have experienced had we not allowed them to use our back streets in the first place. And that will place pressure on City Hall and local authorities to develop policy solutions specifically tailored to the main roads. Very briefly on pollution, we are monitoring pollution through diffusion tubes, and we are monitoring traffic levels. And as I noted on Friday, and I'll put in the chat box now, at 5 key locations across the borough, we found no appreciable change in the amount of traffic on our roads in lockdown, out of lockdown, compared with 2019 levels. Now, there's clearly a lot more work to be done on this, and it would help if anti-low traffic neighbourhood vandals weren't systematically destroying traffic counters in the borough, but they're the key mechanism that we require to determine how well LTNs are working. But I think I'll leave it there because I've gone on long enough, Chair, and I'll share the data from Friday in the chat box.
That'll be great. I'm just conscious of time, and I'm conscious of time. So I'm going to come on to the next part of the discussion around LTN, which is around, well, I'm going to let Councillor Race sort of open the discussion for that.
Right, thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions that broadly around impact on residents and the response from residents in Hackney. On my first question is around Equalities impact assessments and to what extent these were done for the areas covering LTNs, to ascertain whether or not there would be a disproportionate impact on any minority groups. And my second question is a slightly more broad one, but in terms of Hackney residents, how have the introduction of the LTNs gone down with people who actually live within them? Thank you.
2 very good questions. So if I can ask either of Councillor Burke, if you'd like to start, but again, if you could just keep the contribution a minute or 2.
So the Equalities impact assessment regarding the emergency transport plan is, I believe, if I can recall correctly, under section 7 of that plan. And Andy can kind of talk about what we undertook as part of that, I think, now. In terms of kind of resident feedback, that's still ongoing at the moment as part of the commonplace platform work. I've not gone into great detail of the number of pro and anti voices because I've always been very clear that a meaningful consultation is one in which people come and tell us that they like things or they do not like things, but they give a clear reason as to why they believe they are either working or not working. And I think that that's how we get the most out of consultations. I've been very clear in the last couple of days, and I've had need to be because of a variety of reasons which I won't go into now, that I think that the referendumisation of our politics and the referendumisation of consultations is a bad thing. I think it runs counter to the principles of representative democracy, and I think it's important that we remember that in 2018, 81% of the voters in this borough opted for pro-low traffic neighbourhood parties, and I think that the ultimate test of the popularity of these measures will be at the ballot box. But Andy can touch on the Equalities impact assessment.
Yeah, I mean, we have done Equalities impact assessment. They were done at a high level when we did the original transport strategy. We followed that up by doing another one when we did the local implementation plan, and we did one for the emergency transport plan as well. And when we go and do individual schemes, we look at those or the latest EQA yet again. So they have been done and they are there, and the evidence we've done as part of the pre-implementation has shown that there isn't a negative impact across the various groups. It is important, however, that we carry on reviewing that, and as I said in my original introduction, we are doing some work around that with Councillor Williams, and that needs to continue. It's only really just starting, but we'll need some more time to actually go through that. But it is something that we need to keep live. We're also looking at it in terms of some correspondence we're getting regarding one particular low traffic neighbourhood and a school street up in the north of the borough, and where someone has put in a claim for it being a negative towards their travel time to a disability school, and we're looking at the
Thank you very much, Andy. Councillor Ray's, is there any follow-up, or other councillors just on that topic specifically?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we'll do is, if there's no other question follow-up just in relation to sort of the Equalities impact assessment, what we'll do is we'll go on to the final topic, and then I'll allow rounds for like generic questions that aren't necessarily related to that as well, as I've got some myself too. So Councillor Pallis is going to kick us off for the third specific topic.
Yeah, I do apologise. My internet is not being great, so I'm just going to keep off video and just keep an audio. Can you hear me, Mete?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Thank you, Councillor Pallis.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. So we're all fully supportive of the LTNs on this commission, and I think one of the key questions about sustainability of the scheme. So I've got two questions. One question for Councillor Burke and one question for Andy. Councillor Burke, do you agree with me and many residents in Cllr that seeing a reduction of hours in the controlled parking zone in Cllr will see in all likelihood an increase in short car journeys, displacement parking and air pollution across the Stanvertle area that will undermine the implementation and aims of LTN measures in Cllr and the north of the borough? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pallis. And it feels in many ways like that was a question that was well prepared, but it was a good question. You may be aware that the decisions relating to the changing of hours of controlled parking zones lie with all officers as a delegated responsibility. It's very important that we as councillors, though I have overall kind of strategic and political with a small p control of the trajectory of that service area, that we do not as councillors directly intervene in the decisions of officers in that area, because I'm sure you would agree there's a great deal of moral hazard associated with those decisions, and I'm comfortable with the idea that I don't get the ultimate and final say on those matters. For the commissioners who are unaware, this matter relates to the kind of two-stage consultation process that we undertake regarding controlled parking zones. And at the second consultation feedback stage, a large number of people responded requesting a curtailment of those hours. And as a result, our officers were minded to take the view that those hours should be curtailed. Councillor Pallis will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the new hours have been significantly shortened to between 10 a.m. and 12 midday. And I completely concur with the idea that I believe this will have a negative impact on the area. In fact, controlled parking is one of the unsung heroes of the elimination and reduction in emissions associated with the operation of motor vehicles. Probably no policy measure has done more to eliminate short distance local car journeys than controlled parking. I'm very supportive of it, and I'm delighted to be bringing a new consultation to Stamford West area imminently, because it's long overdue in that area too. So I concur with Councillor Pallis's view, and that's why I will be watching the effect of the decision that officers make on parking and parking displacement in the local area, and crucially parking stress, which is the key trigger for officers to go back out and reconsult on the matter in that particular area. But I'm sure commissioners understand that it is neither within my gift nor is it entirely desirable to expect it to be in the gift of councillors to change officers' mind on this issue, because it does have the potential to become political football and subject to kind of moral hazard. Decisions that may arise under those circumstances may be more related to our electoral priorities than to the common good of the borough, and that would not be a good thing when it came to controlled parking.
Thank you. And I just want to follow up with Andy on a question, but I'm glad we agree that controlled parking zones are in the common good of the borough, and standard hours are, the approach on the whole to take. To Andy.
Sorry, Councillor Pallis, could I just say very briefly, if parking stress arising from a change in the hours associated with this controlled parking zone is proven to be deleterious to the residents of that ward, I will have no doubt and have no reservation whatsoever in having officers go and assess that and prepare it as the basis for a future consultation on changes.
Thank you. Just a question for Andy. I was just wondering if you know what the average bus speed was before the introduction of LTNs. And just as a general point, I was just wondering, considering that we don't currently know what the impact of LTNs will be upon bus speeds, do you think be wise to actually pause the schemes that Hackney are backing to reduce bus lanes? Thank you.
Andy, do you want to come in?
Actually, I haven't got the figures off the top of my head. In fact, I closed down a tab that was on. That had that information on a couple of hours ago. The speeds that TfL have come out with more recently do show a dip in bus speeds across the borough, but that's in line with elsewhere. It is very, very difficult to try and draw any connection whatsoever to the impacts of the LTNs to those bus speeds. And similarly, on the routes that, such as a 394, which goes through London Fields and some of the other it's difficult to actually see any improvement in those journey times, because the buses would, if they are ahead of schedule, will just pull over and wait at a stop until back on schedule. So it's hard to actually draw those conclusions. We will continue to work with TfL and the information that they put out for bus fees to actually see what we can draw a connection with. But I would see no reasons to actually halt on delivering these programs pending what could be quite a long-winded process to disseminate or disaggregate information on bus speeds and journey times from TfL.
Can I just very briefly come in, Chair, just to add to that? I will be very brief. I want to be clear. So the average decrease in bus speeds before and after the introduction of LTNs in Hackney is 0.1 miles an hour, and that is in line with the average decrease across London over that period of 0.1 miles an hour. And what I would be very clear about is that buses have been decreasing their average speed for a decade in London, and TfL has been aware of this. And if we go back to 2016 alone, the 38 at rush hour time had an average speed of 6.4 miles an hour, the 35 6.6, the 73 7.2, the 153 7.3, and the 308 14.4. And so it's clear that this is not a new phenomenon, and we recognise the very important need to free up space for the buses, which Councillor Pallis will have missed because of his problems with the internet. But I was very clear at the outset that remains my number one priority, because it remains the most important mode of transport in this borough.
Great, thank you. It'd be really good to do as well. Firstly, I appreciate your time for all three of you coming here. I know that obviously with these things and to assess the impact of LTN, you're not going to know it like this soon. It's very difficult to look at the data and to be able to draw conclusions, because obviously you need to be able to do it some other time, and also there's other factors like the obvious lockdown and the restrictions. So what would be really good to do is at some point in the future we'll liaise with you around sort of once you've got more data and come around and sort of looking at a much more detailed analysis, and once you've got that sort of information available. I have got I'd say another like 5 minutes I'll give for this item. I know we're quite short for time, but I think it's quite important. I mean, obviously it's been highlighted that a lot of the commission members are obviously of support of the LTN scheme, as am I as well, of course. But I do think it's important that we need to make sure that we're asking some of the questions that we're hearing from those who are sort of more critical of the LTN scheme as well, as part of it's our remit of the commission. So I guess like a lot of from what I've heard from this meeting, And I know that, you know, like circumstances meant that, you know, we have had to react particularly to sort of the emergency transport powers that the government has given us as well. But a lot of what I've heard, especially in relation to the question from Councillor Race around the Equalities impact assessment and sort of the work that's going to be done with Councillor Williams and everything, is there's a lot of retrospect, you know, like, you know, if we'd gone back, we would have done it like this, or we're going to do this. So it's almost like we've taken a decision, but then it's almost like we know that these things should have happened, but because it hasn't happened, we're now going to do it because the decision's already been taken. So I guess my question and challenge to you guys is, are we sort of just doing this because we have to be seen to be sort of ticking off certain box, you know, exercises to be able to say, okay, this is what we've done? Or are we meaningfully actually sort of carrying out those sort of tasks to make sure that it is something that is an inclusive scheme?
Who would you like to respond to that?
I mean, Andy obviously was specifically in relation to the thing, so I'm happy for either way.
Well, I'll confirm it's not about ticking the boxes and then moving on. It's something that is important that we did before we implemented the schemes. You know, and I said we also did it at a high strategic level when we were doing the transport strategy, the LIT. We did it as part of the emergency transport plan, and we then do it as part of schemes. You know, and that's the right thing to do. The important thing is that we actually keep it as live, and that we do keep on reviewing it with the information that's coming back, and that's what we will do. So it's not about ticking boxes.
Sure.
If I could just add,
right. Sorry, just Councillor Beck, just before you come in, just to clarify as well, it's not something that I'm personally sort of saying that that's what you're doing. It's just something that I'm asking based on sort of, I think it's important to put these questions out there because people have been raising these questions, and it's important for you to have the right of reply and be able to sort of clarify that as well. So Councillor Beck, do you want to come in?
So I wasn't quite clear on what you meant by ticking the boxes, Chair. In that, were you asking, are we doing this because other boroughs are doing it, or were you asking something else?
No, it's just, I mean, obviously we haven't had the because of the way things have worked out, we haven't had a proper consultation on this before the scheme was rolled out. So what a lot of concerns that have been raised is, and what we're hearing, well, what I'm personally hearing from a lot of residents is that, you know, are we just doing the consultation because, you know, is Hackney Council already made up its mind? And are we just doing that because we kind of have to do that to roll out a policy? Or is it because it's meaningfully, are we trying to listen? And are there going to be areas where we're looking to sort of improve it and make sure that it's working for the local businesses, for people? These are just some of that's what I'm trying to get at, basically.
I mean, I think that's an excellent question, Chair, and I'll address it directly. There is absolutely no incentive for us as a local authority to implement transport schemes that are, to achieve the strategic goals that we want, that do not work on their own terms. This has been hugely mentally taxing and stressful for all of the officers involved and myself personally, and we would not be pursuing the measures that we are if we did not believe there was an established record behind those measures for achieving the goals that we are seeking to achieve. As regards consultation, I want to be very clear. Firstly, that there's a myth that experimental traffic orders are an emergency power, and they're not an emergency power. They're something that we've used for a number of years. But I suppose it would be fair to say that the manner in which they've been used more recently is a bit more uncommon, but is by no means new in any way. And I think what I would say is, and I've been quite clear about this as a matter of public record in the local press, that I believe, as a matter of principle, that consultation should run concurrently with the delivery of schemes, because that is the only way that the disinterested local residents will gain a sense of how well they think a scheme is working. I think what we've found in the past, and it's important to remember that my predecessor quite rightly moved away from consultations that were effectively determined as a referendum, which I find a highly undemocratic process, which can easily be gained by a vocal minority of people. And I think what we've found with prior consultation is that there are just far too many unknowns, and the public find it quite difficult because they're too busy feeding their kids and paying their bills and doing their jobs, quite rightly, to imagine what the world might look like with those schemes in it. And that's why I support the idea of delivering the schemes, but also people can give us a sense of how they believe their function. I think that's a much more meaningful and engaged way to conduct consultation. So though experimental draft orders allow for concurrent consultation, I personally prefer concurrent consultation as a matter of principle, because I think it works better. I think it leads to an informed engagement with the consultation process. And I think we'll get more out of this consultation than we would have done with prior consultation. A final point that I'd make, and I know not everybody will agree with me on this particular issue, but I don't think that there's any coincidence whatsoever in the most vociferous, implacable opponents of those neighbourhoods now claiming that they prefer prior consultation. And it is my view, and I think this was evidenced by the previous consultation at London Fields traffic neighbourhood, that for those people, they view prior consultation as a means of allowing a small number of people to veto progressive change to the local road transport network. 70% of households in this borough do not own cars, and it is incumbent upon us to be mindful of that when we develop our transport policy, and the fact that prior to the low traffic neighbourhoods, we had the worst pedestrian cyclist casualty rate in London and one of the highest mortality rates from air pollution in the country, and kids growing up with stunted lungs. And those children will not get a vote at the ballot box, and they will not be able to participate in consultations. It's important for us, the corporate parents of this borough, to act in their interest as part of this process.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Say, that question was, I think that's helped clarify a lot of things, and that's partly the reason why I wanted to ask that question, was to give an opportunity for you and obviously others on this call, is obviously the ability to be able to respond. Andy, I really like what you and how the sort of that developed over time, and I think it's important that the communication of that is obviously well sort of put out there. So I'm very pleased to hear that these are the sort of the steps that we're taking, and obviously that I think your answers are very reassuring to us as a commission, and obviously we're very supportive of the LTN scheme, certainly on the individual sort of capacity anyway. So thank you so much for your time. I am, because it's 9:06 actually. Wow, we've been going on for time. We're going to continue with the normal business of the commission. I do want to thank our guests. You don't have to stick around. You're welcome to if you want to. But what we will do is we will arrange some follow-up action points. So we may come to you all three. But Alid, Andy, Councillor Burke, honestly, really appreciate all the work you're doing. We know it's a very difficult task that you've got to do, and obviously we appreciate all your hard work. And we hope to sort of be continuing this conversation at some point in the future. Great. So to the commission now, I'm going to try to keep this section as brief as possible. So we've got the next item is the letter of reply. So we've obviously you would have received the letter sort of in response to the definition of key workers. So I am conscious of time. So unless there are any comments that need to be made, what I would suggest is that we note on the response. If there are any comments, we could take this offline. Actually, Councillor Pallis, did you want to come in quickly?
It's just very quickly, and Carol doesn't have to respond now. It could just be afterwards. I was just wondering about whether other local authorities and what they are doing in terms of key workers, or whether they are looking at this as a category, could just be explored. I did read the letter, and it may have been mentioned, so do correct me if I'm wrong, but it would just be interesting to see how other local authorities are approaching it, but you don't have to reply now.
Yeah, I'm quite conscious, obviously, with Councillor Williams, we haven't asked.
Very briefly then, I think what we've been trying to do is take our approach based on the Mayor of London, and so that's what we've been doing, but happy to follow up with Councillor Pallis offline.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that as well, because obviously we never invited you to comment on this matter, so I don't want to put you in a spot thing. But yeah, our commission members happy to note the reply. Thank you very much.
All good.
Councillor Pallis will also follow up on the agenda that you raised around sort of neighbourhood Cllr as a follow-up action for this commission meeting as well. So Tim, if you can minute that, we will contact the cabinet member responsible to get an update around sort of the neighbourhood Cllr.
Thanks, Mate.
Will do.
Just in relation to the work programme, pretty standard. Obviously, we've got the January sort of cabinet question time where we have, again, we'll have Councillor Burke, Councillor Williams, and also Councillor Nicholson. It takes place at the start of every year, so it's pretty standard that we have to do that. And then obviously I'm gonna be sending you all a much more detailed sort of plan for March and April, particularly around sort of like our review and what our engagement looks like for March and April. So, I mean, unless you've got something really urgent that someone needs to raise around the work plan, I'd sort of propose that we take this conversation offline. I'll email you all, and then if you've got any comments or suggestions, feel free to either email back or feel free to give me a call. Is that okay?
Yep.
All good.
Perfect. In that case, then we have any other business, which I don't believe we have any other business, unless any members would like to raise any other business. Councillor Smyth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just this one really, it's not really any other business really. It's more just to point out to Luke, the pub owner, about government sort of guidance around a code of practice for the commercial property sector and how you deal with landlords. I just wanted to point that out. It's on. If you go to the .gov website, you'll find some information there that might be useful when you come to negotiate your rents.
Thank you, Councillor Smyth. And what we'll do is we're going to make sure we connect Luke with Councillor Nicholson as well and the team. So I'm sure they'll give him all advice or the links on what to follow around the support. Are there any other business? Nope. I actually have 5% battery on my laptop, so that was very great. Otherwise, you would have all seen me disappear, and that would have been quite a scene. But thank you all so much for being patient. I think that was a really good meeting, and we'll catch up around the follow-up. Actually, one thing that I do want to say is, Tim, let's have a conversation about how, because I do think there is something as an outcome of this meeting, particularly around sort of the outdoor space that links to sort of our public realm and a lot of the work that Steve was talking about, Councillor Rose was talking about. So Steve, I'll pick up a phone call with you as well separately, because it'll be good to kind of think about how we can, I think Guy has room to wiggle a little bit. So, yeah, great.
Thanks so much, Mate. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hope you have a great week as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much,
Bye-bye.
Mate. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Mario, as well.
Thank you, Mario.